All right, so today we're diving into something I bet you hear about like every single day.
Oh, yeah.
Democracy. But we're going deeper than the headlines,
Absolutely.
deeper than just the slogans and the sound bites.
Yeah.
We're going deep with Alain de Benoist's book, The Problem of Democracy. Have you heard of this one?
Oh, yeah. It's a good one.
Yeah, I think a lot of our listeners have probably at least heard the name.
Right.
So are you ready to kind of unpack some assumptions about this idea
Yeah.
that we all kind of take for granted?
Absolutely. I think de Benoist really pushes us to look beyond just the surface level
Yeah.
and really grapple with, the historical roots
Mm-hmm.
and all the different interpretations of democracy that have existed over time.
And he does this by first pointing out something I think is fascinating, that the word democracy itself
Uh-huh.
is often used in a way like it's
Oh, yeah.
like a magic word,
Totally.
like a shield to deflect any criticism.
It's like that story he tells about how just chanting, democracy
Right.
is enough to silence any opposing viewpoint.
Yeah, it's like you can't argue with that.
Right, exactly. It's like it's become this,
Sacred.
this sacred, a religious incantation almost.
Yeah, you're
Like, should we even agree on what it means before we start
Right.
throwing it around?
Yeah, and it's so easy to assume that we all mean the same thing
Exactly.
when we say democracy. But I mean, what about like ancient Greek democracy, where
Yeah.
citizens actually participated directly
Yeah.
versus the representative democracy that we have today? I mean, are those even comparable?
That's a key distinction that I think he makes.
Right.
Is that, in ancient Greece, you had this,
This face-to-face.
this face-to-face democracy
Yeah.
where citizens were directly involved
Yeah.
in decision-making.
Yes.
And their idea of liberty was all about participation
Right.
in the city's life.
So it was less about like what's in it for me and more about how we can
Yes,
shape this
shape.
community together.
Yeah, it was about shaping the community together.
Interesting.
And it's interesting, too, because,
Yeah.
the English language doesn't even have a direct equivalent for the Greek word demos,
Oh, wow.
which referred to the people as this collective entity.
That's fascinating.
And so this shift in focus from this, collective people to more individual rights, which was driven by, things like Christian individualism
Yeah.
and Enlightenment thought,
Mm-hmm.
really changes how we view democracy.
It's mind-blowing to think that that very concept of the people
Right.
has like evolved so much. And it's
Yeah.
no wonder we have so many different ideas of what it should actually look like.
Exactly.
And speaking of all these different ideas, democracy has always had its fair share of critics.
For sure.
Right? And there's this classic argument about rule by the incompetent masses.
Yeah.
And I remember reading this Tadneen quote
Uh-huh.
that said, 10 million ignorant men cannot constitute a wise one. Like, it really makes you think.
Yeah, it's the classic elitist critique of democracy.
Yeah. Right.
But de Benoist pushes back against this,
Okay.
like oversimplification.
Mm-hmm.
He says we need to consider different types of competence.
Yep.
And what's fascinating is that even Aristotle,
Uh-huh.
who's definitely not a champion of the common man,
Right.
recognized that the collective wisdom of the people could be valuable
Okay.
in certain areas.
Interesting.
Like, for instance, he believed that while individuals might be susceptible to their own biases
Okay.
or limited knowledge, a large group of people with their diverse experiences
Right.
could actually arrive at a more balanced judgment.
So it's not as simple as saying the masses are always wrong or
Yeah.
experts always know best.
Right, exactly. There's nuance here.
There's nuance.
Yeah.
But then you have this other big criticism, right?
Yeah.
The tyranny of the majority.
Oh, yeah.
Could democracy just become a tool for the majority to suppress the rights of a minority?
Yeah. This is a very real concern, and history is full of examples.
Right.
Where majority rule has been used to justify oppression and all sorts of terrible things.
Of course.
But it's important to remember that this majority principle
Yeah.
is just one technique for measuring the will of the people.
Right.
It's not some absolute truth.
Right.
I mean, what if the majority is simply wrong about something?
Yeah.
Or what if their preferences are inconsistent?
Well, de Benoist brings up this really cool paradox to illustrate this point.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Something about Condorcet and Arrow.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Okay, so imagine you have three friends deciding on pizza toppings.
Okay, I'm with you.
One loves pepperoni, one hates it,
Okay.
and one is indifferent.
Okay.
By majority vote, they get pepperoni,
Right.
even though one person strongly dislikes it.
Right.
So what Condorcet and Arrow showed is that
Yeah.
even if each individual's preferences are totally logical, the outcome of a majority vote can be illogical
Wow.
and unpredictable. So their work shows how majority rule, while seemingly straightforward,
Right.
can produce some pretty weird
Yeah.
and potentially unfair results.
Yeah, that pizza example really makes it clear.
Yeah.
So even if everyone votes in good faith, we can still end up with outcomes that don't reflect the will of the people.
Totally.
But doesn't this modern emphasis that we have on pluralism and individual rights make this problem even worse?
Yeah.
Like, we're so focused on our differences that we've almost lost sight of any shared national identity.
That's a key question that Benoist raises.
Yeah.
Like, if we become so fragmented as a society,
Right.
so focused on our individual identities and group differences, what happens to the idea of a unified people?
Right.
Can democracy even function without some sense of shared values and purpose?
Yeah. That's a big question.
It is a big question.
We're going to have to dive into that one.
And, this fragmentation, this emphasis on individual interests over the common good.
Right.
This might be contributing to another problem we see in a lot of democracies today.
And that is
political apathy.
Political apathy.
People just feel disillusioned.
Yeah.
Like their vote doesn't matter and they just tune out.
It's like that saying, like, let sleeping dogs lie or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, if people aren't engaged, maybe that's a sign that things are okay, stable.
Yeah.
But Benoist says, no, this kind of apathy, it actually creates this vacuum.
It does.
That can be filled by something much more dangerous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This lack of participation doesn't equal stability.
Right.
It creates fertile ground for extremism.
Right, because if the majority of people are disengaged, then a small but highly motivated minority with radical ideas,
they can seize the opportunity.
They can step in
and exert a disproportionate influence.
Yeah.
They're the only ones who care enough to make things happen.
Wow.
For better or for worse.
That's a chilling thought.
It is.
That democracy could essentially be hijacked by a passionate minority if everyone else is just sitting on the sidelines.
Exactly.
So where do we go from here?
Right.
I mean, if this liberal model of democracy that we're familiar with is facing all these challenges, are there any viable alternatives?
Well, Benoist proposes an interesting one called organic democracy.
Organic democracy.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's unpack this a little bit.
Yeah, it's a pretty radical departure.
Okay.
From the individualistic rights-based approach.
That
we're so used to.
Okay, so what's the core concept here?
Well, it's about revitalizing popular sovereignty.
Okay.
But not just through the act of voting.
Okay.
It's about fostering a deep sense of community.
Okay.
And emphasizing the common good over individual interests.
I see.
So the goal is to increase participation at all levels of society.
Okay.
From local communities to, national decision-making.
I remember he quoted Muller Vandenbroek, who defined democracy as a folk's participation in its own destiny.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it really captures that essence of what he's talking about.
This idea of the collective, the folk, shaping its own future.
Precisely. And this highlights a fundamental difference between organic democracy and the liberal model. Instead of just focusing on individual rights and freedoms, it emphasizes the responsibility of citizens to participate actively in shaping their collective destiny.
So it's about finding that balance between individual liberty and the common good.
Exactly.
So how would this actually work in the real world?
Right.
What are some concrete examples?
Yeah, so Benoist suggests several pathways. One is greater decentralization, giving more power to local communities and regions.
Okay, so empowering people to have more control over their immediate surroundings so they don't feel so...
And reduce the influence of these distant, centralized bureaucracies.
That makes sense because then people would feel more motivated to actually get involved if they felt like they could make a difference.
Exactly.
Okay, what else? Another key element is the increased use of referendums.
Okay.
Allowing citizens to have a direct say.
Like a direct vote.
Yeah, on specific issues.
Yeah.
This bypasses the political class and gives people a direct voice on matters that affect their lives.
It's like taking power back from the politicians.
Exactly.
And putting it directly
in the hands of the people.
Yeah.
And it could force those in power to be more responsive to the will of the people.
To the will of the people, knowing that they could be held accountable through these direct votes.
Exactly.
And to further encourage direct participation, de Benoist suggests revitalizing local assemblies, bringing back that element of face-to-face democracy that was so central to the ancient Greek model. So imagine like town hall meetings where people can engage in open and respectful dialogue with their neighbors to find solutions to local problems.
I love that idea.
It's about rekindling that sense of community, of working together for the common good.
Absolutely.
It seems like a powerful antidote to the isolation and alienation that is so prevalent in modern society.
Totally.
But wouldn't this require like a massive cultural shift?
It would.
I mean, our society is so deeply ingrained with these individualistic values.
It would definitely require a fundamental shift in thinking.
Okay.
We'd need to move away from this hyper-individualism that dominates so much of modern life.
Right.
And rediscover the importance of community, shared responsibility, and the common good.
Yeah.
It's a tall order.
It is.
But considering the challenges facing our current systems, perhaps it's time to start exploring these alternative paths.
I mean, it really makes you think about what democracy actually means.
Yeah.
If it's really about the power of the people.
Right.
Are our current systems actually living up to that ideal?
That's the question, isn't it?
Or have we allowed that power to be like diluted or even hijacked?
Yeah. And it's not just some abstract philosophical debate.
Right.
It's about understanding the systems we live under.
Right.
How they actually function and whether they're serving us, the people, or someone else's agenda.
And de Benoist doesn't shy away from those tough questions.
No, he doesn't.
He really pushes us to think critically about these assumptions we make about democracy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this deep dive so valuable.
Totally.
You know, it's not just about memorizing facts.
Right.
It's about challenging our own perspectives.
Absolutely.
And becoming more informed and engaged citizens.
It's about recognizing that democracy isn't like a one-size-fits-all concept.
Well, there are many different interpretations.
Yeah, there are many different interpretations.
Many ways to put those principles into practice.
Exactly, and the liberal representative democracy that we're most familiar with is just one model.
Right.
And as we've seen, it has its flaws.
It's vulnerable to the influence of money.
Yes.
It can lead to apathy and disengagement.
Right.
And it can prioritize individual rights at the expense of the common good.
Sometimes.
But understanding these flaws isn't about dismissing democracy altogether.
Right.
It's about critiquing it constructively.
Yeah.
And thinking about how we can make it better.
Exactly.
More responsive to the needs and aspirations of the people.
And that's where exploring these alternatives,
Yeah.
like organic democracy, becomes so important.
Yeah.
It's not the only alternative,
Of course.
but it offers a compelling vision
Yeah.
of how we might reimagine democracy,
Right.
focusing on community, participation, and shared responsibility.
So for our listener, this deep dive is really just the beginning
It is.
of a much larger exploration.
Absolutely.
What are some of the key takeaways?
Yeah, what are some of the things they can take with them
that they can carry with them
as they continue to learn and engage
with these ideas?
with these ideas?
About democracy.
Well, firstly, I think it's crucial to remember that democracy is dynamic.
Yes.
It's evolving. It's not static.
It's a process.
It is a process.
It's not an endpoint.
Exactly. And it requires constant vigilance,
Right.
critical thinking, and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
We can't just passively accept the systems we inherit.
No, we can't.
We need to actively shape them
I do.
to make sure they reflect our values
Yeah.
and serve the common good.
Exactly. Democracy is not a spectator sport.
I love that.
It's a participatory process
Yeah.
that demands our attention,
Our engagement.
and our willingness to ask tough questions.
What kind of democracy do we want?
Yeah, what values do we want it to embody?
Yeah.
And how can we make those values a reality?
Those are the big questions.
Those are the questions we should all be asking.
Yeah, and I think this deep dive is a call to action.
It is.
It's about taking ownership of this idea, this ideal of democracy,
Yeah.
and working to make it the best that it can be.
Because ultimately, the future of democracy rests
Yeah.
not in the hands of politicians
Right.
or experts,
Right.
but in the hands of everyday citizens,
That people.
the people who are willing to engage,
To participate.
and to demand a system
Yes.
that truly serves the people.
Well said. I think that's a great place to leave it.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you coming on the show today
Yeah, this is fun.
and sharing your insights on this pretty complex topic.
Absolutely.
And for our listeners out there, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the problem of democracy.
Definitely.
Be sure to check out the show notes for more resources.
Yeah.
And until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning.
And keep participating.
And we'll see you on the next deep dive.